Hello and welcome to CJAD 6301, Crime and Criminal Justice. We are entering, excuse me, no, it's not COVID. We're entering week 7 of our discussion on theories of crime and criminality and the criminal justice system. Today, we're going to be talking about applying justice, adhering justice, bringing justice. More specifically, we're going to be talking about retributive, restorative, and rehabilitative justice. We're going to look into how law enforcement works to try to decrease criminality, and we are going to discuss the challenge of crime within a free society. We're going to talk a little bit about Wendell Holmes. So let's start with justice, or the types of justice, or the goals of justice, because we want to bring justice back to society. One of our great Supreme Court justices, Hugo Black, I think it was, said that it is easier to look upon the face of God than it is to find justice in the United States of America. This was in one of the 1960s cases. I'm wanting to say Furman v. Georgia, but don't quote me on that. But he did state that it was easier to look upon the face of God or to find God than it is to find justice in the United States of America. And that's because justice means different things to everybody. Okay, we find ourselves, yes, I've changed to my summer hat. It's going to be 91 degrees today here in Odessa, Texas. Anyway, justice is different, or there's a perception of justice, and justice means different things to different people. Okay, I have a book back there, right there. It's called Justice. It is by Michael Sandel. And that book is about how do we bring justice to the world. And the thing that comes to a lot of people's mind is social justice. We need to make sure that everything is equitable. Well, outcomes can't be equitable. Opportunities, we could try to make sure that everybody gets the same opportunity. We can turn around and we can say that white guys have privilege, and we get to the positions that we have because we're white guys. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about criminal justice. How do we bring about order? How do we ensure that crime and criminality is properly dealt with? Well, there's a couple theories. Well, there's 3 theories. Well, there's more than that. Within the goals of sentencing, we find retribution, rehabilitation, and restoration. We want to restore order. We want to restore society to the way that it was before the crime occurred. And we want to make sure that we can bring society back to the way that it was before this offense took place. So how do we go about doing that and addressing that? The first is retributive, or just desserts. Since the 1970s, we have believed, or there's been an attempt to avenge the wrongs of the victims within our society. And we send people to prison, and now we've got books and articles about the mass incarceration of American society, because we have, 2 million people, 6 million people, in some form of correctional supervision, whether it's institutional, parole, or probation. Um, that's a lot of people. It is. We are ranked #1 in the entire world for the number of people that we have under some form of correctional supervision. And we'll talk about this a little more when we get back to crime in a free society, because the United States is a free society and we are extremely free. But the retributive idea is that you do a crime, you do the time. Okay, so whatever the crime is, whatever the punishment is, this is what you're going to have to serve, in order to, be punished for the crimes and the behaviors that you committed. We find this growing up. You break a rule of the house and you find yourself being grounded, sent to your room. You get your electronics taken away. You can't play your game systems. You can't do any of the things online. You lose your screen time. You lose your socialization time. Right here, we're in the midst of the COVID crisis and everybody's locked up at home. So everybody's probably thinking that they're being punished for not getting the coronavirus, being punished because you might give the coronavirus to somebody else. This is how we do retributive justice. We punish you. We send you to prison. It's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a stripe for a stripe, a life for a life. There's, the Hammurabi's Code. A lot of people say that's from the Law of Moses, but it wasn't. It was Hammurabi. Okay. You have to, for every stripe that you cause, you have to bring it about. You need to restore it. And we'll get to restorative justice here in a second. But the idea is that you will pay for your crimes, and that is just. Justice is found when people are sent to prison because they've committed a crime. About 75% of all Americans polled feel that criminals are not punished harsh enough. Okay, John Langbine, he's a severe critic of the plea bargain system, says that the plea bargain system doesn't bring justice to the world because people aren't being punished for the crimes that they committed. A serial rapist will end up plea bargaining down to aggravated assault, and he doesn't become a sex offender, and he doesn't have to register as a sex offender because that's the part of the plea bargain. How is that justice? How is that bringing about just desserts? 80% of those people polled believe that we need more people sent to prison. We don't have room in the prisons as is. We send more people to prison than any other country on the planet. The average time in prison is 8 years. The average time in prison for rape is 11 years. The average time in prison for murder is 36 years, because they haven't been to Texas. Texas, if you murder somebody, we send you to prison for life. Life without. However, I went to a trial of John Michael Hayes. He was a Big Spring guy. He was a major within the Aryan Circle, and he murdered one of his crew. And he was found guilty and sentenced to 99 years in prison. He didn't get life. He was already in his 60s. So, yeah, he got life. He was never going to leave prison. But the average across the country, the average sentence for murder is 36 years. How's that just? It is retributive justice. We're punishing you. You spend 36 years in prison, your life is pretty much over. Then you're a convicted felon. As a convicted felon, you don't have the right to, you can't get any job that you want. You can't find employment. A lot of times you have to check the box So people aren't going to hire you because you're a convicted felon. They're not going to rent to you because you're a convicted felon. You can't vote. You can't own a firearm. You can't possess a firearm. A lot of your rights as citizens are taken away from you because you've committed a felony. Those felonies are, these rights are important to a lot of people. And although in Texas, once you're no longer on paper, you get your right to vote back, but you don't get your right to possess and buy firearms. You don't get to the right to not check the box. You still have to check the box that you're a felon, so people aren't going to rent to you because you're a convicted felon. So there's a lot of retribution and retributive punishment that comes along with being convicted. The next one that we want to talk about is rehabilitative. Also in the 1960s, we had the idea that we wanted to, late 1960s, we wanted to rehabilitate offenders. We wanted, 50s and 60s, we wanted to treat the symptoms. We wanted to provide a way for an offender to become a productive member of society, because there's something wrong. The positivist movement and the positivist theories that we talked about in earlier weeks suggests that we as Americans, we as a society, we as criminals are committing crime because of another underlying cause. Famine is caused because there's no food. Auguste Comte, or Comte, or however you want to pronounce his name, Auguste Comte is how I pronounce it, said that crime is just part of life, and you're always going to find crime. But if you look at other criminologists from the positivist movement, crime is committed because you are not achieving your goals. Okay. Robert Merton and William Bonger and Richard Queenie. If you cannot achieve those things that you want to achieve legitimately, you're going to achieve them illegitimately. Sigmund Freud said that the crime is caused because there is some form of psychological problem or psychiatric problem. Crime is committed because there's a substance abuse problem, or there's an anger management problem, or there's lots of different reasons why an individual is going to commit crime. So we find that we need to treat that. Within rehabilitative justice, we want to treat those causes, those symptoms, to make you go out and commit crime. So if you're stealing and thieving and you've got a substance abuse problem and you're committing these crimes because to feed your habit, we need to send you to rehabilitation so that you can overcome your habit, so that you can learn to manage your addiction, so that you don't have to steal anymore. If you've got an anger management problem and you're committing domestic violence, you're always getting into fights, and you're beating your wife, and you're beating your husband, and you're raping people, or you're murdering people, you've got an anger management problem. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we send you to a anger management class. We want to ensure that you understand those triggers that cause you to become violent, so that you don't become violent. We want you to understand those triggers that cause you to think that it's okay to rape a person, so that you don't do that anymore. Rehabilitative justice is just that. We rehabilitate you and turn you back into a productive member of society, that member of society that you were before you entered the world of criminality. The third area that we want to talk about is restorative justice. And restorative justice is just that, it restores. What can we do to ensure that you as the offender restores society to the way that it was before? Hammurabi's had restorative justice. The Bible has restorative justice. Restorative justice is something that has been used throughout the world, throughout world history. If you steal one of my chickens, you have to give me back 2 chickens. If for instance, Landon's in his brand new truck and he comes out to my house and he spins donuts in my front yard, tears up my lawn, and causes a whole lot of property damage. How are we going to restore that? And how are we also going to punish him and teach him a lesson so that he doesn't do it again? So, under the thoughts and the auspices of restorative justice, Landon is going to have to restore my yard. He's going to have to get a shovel, and he's going to have to fill in the ruts. He's going to have to plant seed. He's going to need to make sure that the grass grows. He's going to have to maintain my yard. He's going to have to restore my yard to what it looked like before he came and conducted his personal property damage. If he hurt any of my trees or my rocks or my driveway or the walls of my house, he's going to need to fix all of that as well. And then for a punitive world, he's going to need to continue to maintain my yard for a year. Hold on. That sounds like slavery to me. Anyway, he needs to restore. Now, let's say, for example, that a woman has her husband murdered. She doesn't have her husband murdered. Her husband is murdered by me. We'll use me as the bad guy this time. And we'll pretend that Caitlin's married and I kill her husband. Well, Caitlin depends upon her husband for her life. Okay? She's a stay-at-home mom. She has 3 kids at the house. Her husband kept her barefoot pregnant in the kitchen, and she does not have a way to provide for her family. Well, and I killed her husband. So within the thoughts of restorative justice and what came out of the truth circles of the Native American courts and the traditions of the Native Americans, I would have to act in the role of husband to Caitlin and father for her children. I would need to provide for their welfare. I would need to provide for their life. I'd need to make sure they have food, a place to live, that health care, and restore their lifestyle to the way that it was before I took their husband, father away from them. And that's restorative justice. So these are the modes, the 3 R's in justice: retributive, restorative, and rehabilitative. So let's move on to our next topic, which is how do cops work towards decreasing crime? And there's 3 worlds, and I know I'm already up to 18 minutes, and I'm supposed to keep these things below 20 minutes, or below 15 minutes. That's not going to happen unless I just slightly cover the next 2 subjects, but I don't think I'm going to do that to you. So how has law enforcement sought to decrease criminality? So because the corrections department punishes you, whether it's restorative, retributive, or rehabilitative, the corrections department tries to correct you and they bring justice. So how do we prevent the offense to begin with? Well, the cops have done that and the law enforcement has done that through programs like community-oriented policing. It's thought and it's believed that if police officers get out of their cars and they are more involved in the community, then the rift of trust that we find between law enforcement and the public will be healed, and the public will find it easier to call the police and say, hey, we've got these people that are committing this crime. We're seeing a lot of that right now, especially with COVID, because we're more afraid of the person walking down the street than we are of the police. So we're going to call the police and say, oh no, Dr. Fisher's not wearing his mask. See, I've got my mask right here. So if I find myself in a world to where I cannot, where I can and not be more than 6 feet away from somebody, I can put my mask on. And then I can just wear my mask. I can breathe through my bandana. I have this one. I have 2 of this kind, and I have 2 camouflage ones, and I got a Batman one and a Superman one. We've got a couple pink ones for my wife. And I wish Hobby Lobby was open. I'd buy some more. But the idea is that through community-oriented policing, is that police will use relationships within the community to help find out where the problem areas are. And then they use problem-oriented policing, where police departments will overemphasize operational effectiveness outside of the department. Because of these relationships with the community, with business owners, and with residents within the community, they can get people invested in the community. Okay? Because the thought is that if you're invested in the community, you're not going to commit crime. And police officers as social workers, not just police officers, they are social workers. They work in the community. They're community organizers. Okay? Their job is to analyze problems. Their job is to find out where the problem areas are, and then they can increase their presence and they can increase their activities within those problem areas to help decrease the level of crime that we find within society. Because, again, crime is caused and symptoms. Crime is caused by forces outside of the individual that's causing the individual to commit crime. So if we can help eliminate those problems, or we can provide services to ensure that those crimes do not occur, then we have a better world. Okay, so police departments will refer people to the food stamp office, to soup kitchens, to food banks, to, we've seen stories here of late where a single mom of 5 didn't have any money and she didn't have any food stamps, and her kids were hungry, so she was caught stealing food. Well, the police officer paid for the food so that this woman didn't have to be arrested. Those stories are few and far between. Most time they'd be arrested or they'd be ticketed. The kids would be put in social services. Okay. But the police departments have to find a way to solve problems before they become problems within the community. So we want to be problem oriented. Okay. They need to be proactive to solve these problems. Okay. Because if the law enforcement is doing what they need to be doing, there's going to be no need for retributive, restorative, or rehabilitative justice. Because the law enforcement is in the community. They're driving up and down the streets. They are the ones that know what's going on in the community, or they should. And if you're a police department, you don't know what's going on in your community, you need to hire a new chief, you need to hire new officers, because it's the job of the officer, back to community-oriented policing, to know what's going on in his area. Okay. He's like a vicar. Okay. He's the bartender. He's the hairstylist. The pastor. People will talk to these individuals, but they won't talk to a cop. These individuals, the hair salon and the barber shop and the bartender, even the pastor or the vicar, there's a lot that, or the rabbi or the Hoji, I forgot what he's called. It's the Hoja. The priest, whatever he is. You can share your problems with them, but they can't help anything. They might be able to give you advice, but they can't change anything. law enforcement, our police departments are in a position because of their relationship with the city to say, hey, we have this problem needs to be addressed. And the police departments need to know about that and need to know how to analyze that. Okay. And the method that law enforcement uses for problem solving is SARA. That's called Scanning, Analysis, Response, and Assessment. We're going to scan for a problem. As a police officer is patrolling the streets, as the analysts in the police department are looking through CompStat and looking for hot spots, they're identifying reoccurring problems. The prostitution problem or the homeless problem there on 6th Street in Austin, or 8th Street here. I think it's 8th Street here in Odessa. We want to identify the problems and we want to identify the consequences of ignoring that problem. What happens if we just don't worry about it? How is that going to devolve or decay our society and our community? Okay, we want to analyze and see if this problem has occurred elsewhere in other communities across the country. And what did they do? What kind of response did they create to the homelessness problem? When I was working probation down in Big Bend for a probation department in Big Bend, one of the things that city, one of the cities inside my jurisdiction would do, if there was somebody that was homeless, they'd give them a one-way bus ticket to Odessa. Say, here, we'll give you a bus ticket to Odessa. There's a homeless shelter there. We can't help you here. But they'd make sure that there was no way for that homeless person to get back to that particular town. So the homeless would end up here in Odessa. I haven't seen a whole lot of homeless in the last few months. I'm expecting that trend to change, seeing that oil closed at less than minus $37 a barrel. When I started this recording 27 minutes ago, oil was back to $20 a barrel. There was a sigh of relief. But if you've ever wanted to see the exodus, it's happening right here in Midland, Odessa. People are leaving Midland, Odessa faster than you can step on a cat's tail. When the COVID virus quarantine is over and we're freely to leave again, the 130,000 people in this town, I bet you is going to drop to 80,000. That's my guess. We'll see how it works. I also want to track crime and homelessness because I think that we're going to see those things increasing because we've had a 70% layoff here in the area. Everybody is losing their job, not just in the oil field, because the oil field is crashing. There's not as much need for waitresses at the restaurants. There's not as well, they're all closed at the moment anyway. There's no need for as many people at the stores. Okay, there's not going to be need for all of these people here in the Permian Basin because the oil company here, the businesses here, cannot produce oil for less than $30 a barrel. They'll lose money, and they're losing a ton of money right now. So the only way the businesses can save is by laying people off. That's just the way that it's going to happen. So let's discuss the challenges of crime within a free society. It is better to set 1,000 guilty people free than to send one innocent person to prison. We want to protect the rights of the individuals, even if it causes or allows guilty people to go free. And that's the biggest problem with living in a free society. We have certain rights. We have specific rights that we have. We have the right not to self-incriminate ourselves. We are innocent until proven guilty, or at least we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. And it's the job of the government to prove that we are guilty. It's not our job to prove that we're innocent. It's their job to prove that we're guilty. So without enough evidence, bad guys go free. If evidence is tainted, bad guys go free. If police officers lie, during testimony or during evidence gathering, bad guys go free, because it's better to let 1,000 bad guys go free than to send one innocent person to prison. And that should be our goal as criminal justice professionals. We want to make sure that the people that we send to prison belong in prison. Okay? We want to work as criminal justice professionals. We want to work to prevent crime, to deter crime before crime occurs. Okay. Then we want to, if once a crime does occur, we want to make sure that we restore the community. And we can restore the community through either rehabilitative or restorative justice at the correction side, at the back end of the justice system. Okay. But we want to make sure that innocent people don't end up in this meat grinder of a criminal justice system. So what appears to be a system that protects the guilty is in fact a system that protects the innocent from oppression from a tyrannical government. Okay, so it's 31 minutes. I'm over. This is week 7. I'll see you in the forums. I'll see you in your essays. Have a great week. Stay healthy. Don't forget to social distance. If you can't stay away from people, put your mask on.